everybody. My name's Jeff Nepper, and welcome to the Fireside Chat, all about AI. I want to thank our sponsor, Litmus. If you'll please join me with a round of applause for Litmus, making this possible. Thank you. Please. The purpose of that clip for me is that one day, that's just the workshop I want. I do not want to fly around in a suit. I don't want to fight bad guys, but I want Jarvis, and I want that workshop. Today we have a great panel, and our focus is going to be all about a conversation around AI. And I'd love to start with just an introduction of each individual. To my right, I think everyone knows Magnus, CTO at HiveMQ. Magnus, why don't you tell the group, in pop culture, movies, books, what's your favorite AI character?
I really love this question. I think I'm going to go with Samantha from Her, the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And it's not because I like Scarlett Johansson. One, it's because it's a hopeful movie about AI. I like that part. But actually, from a product perspective, what I like is it's a focus on the user experience. It's not the power of the model. It's not the power of the AI model. It's about the user's experience of actually using the model and how it understands the user's needs and solves for the user's specific needs. So Samantha from Her.
Samantha from Her. I would not have guessed that. Zach Etier, VP of Architecture at Flow Software. Zach, same question.
I'm probably a little vanilla here, maybe not as cultured as everyone else. So I'm probably gonna have to say Jarvis. And a lot of the same reasons that Magnus said. I love that Jarvis is always there, right? In different forms, either in the suit or in the computer or in the lab, and always knows the context of what Stark's working on, right? It's always there to assist and be awesome, essentially. So I'd have to say Jarvis.
Awesome. Mark Friedman. Mark's the founder at Make Yourself AI. Mark?
My favorite, so it's also from Her, but I'm going to also say one from Ex Machina too. But the reason I like the Her one is because of how rapidly she changes at the end, where there's this moment where she discloses that she's operating multi-threaded at this across multiple people at the same time, and then they all start converging, kind of like what happened with Claudebot a little bit with that forum. So it's just this moment where they can all just do that. And Ex Machina I like because at the very end, she's manipulated him in some way to love her or whatever. And then she just walks past because she doesn't actually, care. It's just a robot. So anyway, I think that's, I like those. I like those.
Awesome. And Sam, VP, is it Product Experience?
Product Experience.
At Litmus. Sam, same question. I'm just going to guess this is coming from a book.
No, actually.
No?
This is from a BBC show from the 70s. But
okay.
Close. So any Doctor Who fans here?
Yeah.
All right. Daleks, because we've been trying to do AI for a long time.
That's well done.
Anyway.
Walker, favorite AI?
It is the robot from Ex Machina, and the reason why is because she is the one who terrified all of you to be skeptical about AI.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, everyone, today we're going to start really big. We're going to start with a dream, then we're going to work it backwards from the dream to understand what's required to get there, and in the immediate future, where the roadblocks are for your first step when you leave here today. So starting with the dream, let's go popcorn, okay? We'll start off with Mark, and then everybody else kind of throw in. The question is, in manufacturing specifically, 3 to 5 year time frame, what is the dream that you hope becomes a realization at the plant level?
What I would like is, what I imagine and hope for is that the AI remembers us, basically. Remembers our intention, remembers what we, our tribal knowledge. Actually remembers it. I think that's the most, it's not just memory like RAG or memory like, a knowledge graph or whatever, but actually understands when to remember the right thing so that it can recall it. Because, that's the difference between someone who's just joined your team and the person who adds the most value, your planner, your whatever, the person you can trust to run your night shift. They remember what's important, at the right time, and they can take action. And that's what's missing. That's what I dream for and what I hope for is to make it so that when we communicate something to an agent, that we trust that it will be recalled at the right time. So it's kind of like just in time, but from memory. And then they have the skills and the capacity to securely take action. So that's what I hope for, because if you've ever had a long chat with an agent, like, which I'm perpetually in a very long chat with an agent, that's you'll find that they forget you, you know? And when it comes to manufacturing and operations, things that matter, you can't forget even the details. You know, you need to know exactly the schema of that table. You need to know exactly the tech. You need to know. So I think that's what I hope for.
Walker, does your dream match his?
It's close, actually. I mean, it's twofold. So from a philosophical perspective, I hope that when we look back on our decision here in the last 3 years to go all in on AI, we're happy with that decision. That's the philosophical answer. I hope we don't have regret. I believe in the power of people, and I don't think we will have regret. From a more practical answer is I'd like to see two things practically. I'd like to see the promise of the digital supply chain realized. That is the idea that every manufacturer is part of an ecosystem where they are connected to every possible supplier and every possible customer, and there is no discrete actions required to set up those connections. So I have to go research my vendors, and I have to establish relationships with my vendors, and I have to go get customers, and I have to try and retain customers. I hope that we can realize that promise. And then within the plant, I hope that we can realize the real promise of AI, which is two things. It is making ordinary people super people, making super people exceptional people. And practically in the plant, we're really addressing downtime when we plan to be down, and we're not dealing with it when we're not planning to be down. And we are really scheduling and running work orders in the absolute most optimal way possible. And we are really using the lots from the vendors that are supposed to be used on this production order, and that we're realizing the promise of closing the gap between what it is humans are great at and what we need help with.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
And that is that, like, it's not just, I mean, so to tie into that and the memory piece, it's that when they do remember and take action this way, it has to be done in such a way that the person who is giving up this information, this intent, their unique human thing that they know what to do, it has to be natural for them. The agent you shouldn't have to use you never have to open VS Code.
And no concern to give up that information.
Right, because it's actually helping you.
Correct.
And yeah, you feel heard and you actually feel helped, and it's exactly.
Who else wants to extend the vision, or maybe
I'd
go
say
a
something
different way?
about that too. Yeah, Mark, what you just said about, or actually Walker, what you just said about being safe with that information, right? I come at it from an industrial data plumbing standpoint, and the foundation for my hope and dream is that we could bring these utilities into the factory. We could run them in the factory. We don't need a data center to do it. We don't even need, more than, a 12 gig card to do it, or even an 8 gig or 4 gig card. So I'm excited about the promise of making this, the nuts and bolts of this stuff, just much more accessible on premises.
If I can build on the nuts and bolts comment, I mean, I think for me it comes down to trusted delegation, right? So I want to trust that just like a colleague, a competent colleague, that I can ask for a task to be accomplished, and that task can be accomplished, and we can trade work back and forth and achieve, meaningful goals with it becomes commonplace, right? And so you talked about people becoming superhuman, and I think that's exactly the idea. Is I become superhuman when I can assign a task to a colleague and know that it's going to get accomplished and done the right way repeatedly with memory and those pieces. So yeah, ultimately my answer just boils down to trusted delegation. That's what I'm looking for.
Zach?
Yeah, for me, it's really operationalizing information and knowledge, right? We have all this tribal knowledge in the factory, and it's in people's heads, right? It's not in a form that an agent can work on. I see agents and AI really being this kind of passive thing where, operators don't have to go add more input. It's just in the background working, and collecting and helping that operator so that they're free to do the things that they want to do, right? They want to focus on the manufacturing. They want to focus on the job that they're doing. Same thing with leadership, right? Leadership, they want to know what the risks are, and for scheduling, what are the scheduling risks, and how can we adjust those to minimize them? I see AI and agents being able to, go through the knowledge of the factory and being able to pull the context together to be able to inform the users of, hey, there's this thing that you're not looking out for. You might want to look out for it and plan for it, right? So I think it's really just coming down to operationalizing information and knowledge.
And I just want to point out, none of the answers here were, I hope the promise is plants without people.
No, dark factories.
No one said that.
There's three things that I would love to actually, this will be the only thing I could possibly contribute to this conversation, is the dream. But for me personally, first and foremost, that human beings are no longer taking part in dangerous activities or things that are harming them physically for longevity and joy of life, right? The heavy and the hard stuff is solved. Two, I believe and I hope and I dream that change management will become easy because we already understand the outcomes. And finally, as a result, that the political wars inside of our facilities, inside of our enterprises, will disappear. No more politics.
I like that dream.
Yeah.
So together, guys, here's the challenge. These feel achievable, right? I mean, nothing felt like there was nothing that didn't feel unachievable in that list. On a 3 to 5 year time frame, probably not across the board by all, but certainly by some. What's currently, or what's going to get in the way over the next 3 to 5 years of that actually happening? Where do we start? If that's the goal, where do we start moving towards?
I'd like to start with this, actually. So I'd like to ask SiteSync to go ahead and run their demo real quick. And if you're a vendor, so SiteSync's device is running in the back here. If you guys haven't gone to their booth, they've got a vibration sensor running, and they're simulating a failure, a bearing failure, or a gearbox failure. And they're using AI. We're using the simplest form of AI right now. Basically, AI running on the edge, doing inferencing, and interpreting essentially vibration waves to determine what is the problem in the gearbox. And if you're a vendor who is on our contact list, you're going to receive an email here any second. All 51 vendors are going to receive an email that's got the diagnosis of the problem, okay? So that's what SiteSync, the basic example, is AI on the edge, essentially driving to us a problem. But I want to lay the framework here. What is the hurdle that's going to keep us from realizing the vision we just said here? And that is taking the wrong first step. Because the very first step you take draws the error vector. It literally lays the vector for the direction you're going to go. There are members of manufacturing industry who get it, and then there are those who don't. And unfortunately, because of Dunning-Kruger, the ones who don't get it don't know they don't get it. Like they're just blind. And that is this. I cannot state this again, and for all the manufacturers in here, the promise of AI is not to replace people. If you go down that road, you are going to fail. What will keep us from realizing this promise is too many manufacturers believing that the promise is in the reduction of headcount. The promise is actually found in optimizing the headcount we already have so that we can grow our headcount. That's actually the promise. And the mistake is going to be believing that it's in the reduction of headcount. And I cannot tell you the number of executives, it's 3 out of every 5 boardrooms I go in, they think it's in the reduction of headcount. And they are going to fail. That's what's going to keep us from realizing that promise.
What's our needs? What do we need to, what's the infrastructure? What's it look like? What do we need to put in place?
Yeah, I've got a good analogy for this. It's a bit of a personal story, but I'll go through it quick. I didn't grow up around manufacturing, but I grew up, my parents are artists, and so I grew up around, bronze workers.
That checks out.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Grew up around bronze workers, glass blowers, ceramicists, and my father's a woodworker, so wood shops, lots of heavy industry equipment, but 1/10 of the safety protections you might expect. And my dad's a one-of-a-kind artist, so he builds these beautiful wood structures and sculptures, but once a year around Christmas, he'd build 10 dollhouses. And to build those 10 dollhouses, they have a spiral staircase. That spiral staircase has treads. Those treads need 2 holes. It ends up being about 260 holes. And so I'm a pretty young lad, and he goes, hey, I'd really like you to help me with this. I'm not a precision drill press for putting holes in a piece of wood, and so he builds me a jig, a mechanical fixture that makes me able to do, as a young lad, makes me able to do an operation repeatably, safely, consistently, reliably, all of those good things. And I'm able to drill these 260 holes really safely and not injure myself, and also make this beautiful dollhouse. And I think that's what we need. That's what's needed, is a harness or a jig for industrial AI, right? So we need the tools that allow us to do industrial AI agentically, safely, repeatably, reliably. And we have good harnesses in software engineering. So we have things like Claude Code that are great at ensuring we have the right context, and that we're not filling that context window in incorrect ways, that we're effectively, that allows us to operate in good space. We don't have that harness for industry, right? And we haven't figured out what that harness is yet. So
it's a great analogy. If there's anybody in here who's ever had any experience with woodworking, you know first and foremost that you spend 80% of your time making jigs.
One time, Jim,
20%
I didn't make a jig, and I no longer have feeling in my thumb. Let me tell you about that.
Need a harness.
So the harnesses are really important, and I think that's one of the hardest things. You can manually manage your prompts. Yeah, this is what we all do. It's difficult. And when you're doing this at scale in a facility where you need to make quick decisions and trust, you can see that the tech has to come quite a bit further than it is today. And I'm glad for this discussion, because it's an honest discussion about the capabilities that we find now and the capabilities that we need to build. And I don't mean to put Mark on the spot, but I think, Mark, you found a really, really interesting happy medium between prompt management, context engineering, all kinds of really good, valuable stuff you're delivering to your users. Maybe you could speak a little bit now about your...
I guess it just comes down to, my perspective is to invert the harness, basically. So a harness, I'm not sure if you guys know much what a harness is, but like Cursor is a harness, Claude Code is a harness.
Claude Code,
and it ends a harness. These are all just like...
Your Python script over the API.
Because you can just prompt, you can just get any of these APIs and you can just prompt it and it'll come back. And what you're doing is you're sending intent through a pattern recognition machine built on all of our knowledge. So it's us, it's just recognizing pattern and echoing through that. Anyway, the harness manages what you put into there. It manages how you respond to the agent's generation, which it only just generates text. And then your harness has to execute from that. And then the harness gives it context. But software, generally speaking, from my experience, has been traditionally like you take industry expertise, you bottle it up, and you give that expertise to people. And then people are forced to use your platform and benefit from your expertise. But I don't think that's how AI should work, because I believe that you are the expert. So the harness should actually be, it should be listening to you primarily, and your intention should be built into it. So you're actually the expert. That's how I think it should work. And then what that means is it puts AI back into the position where I think its actual skill is. Yeah, and well, because AI, right, like we see it execute, and you're like, wow, it just built what and how long? That is amazing. It's an execution machine. And it's like, no, execution is actually a side effect. It's an understanding machine. It always has been an understanding machine. And I think that's what the harness needs to do primarily, is be curious about what your goals and intentions are so that it can execute on your behalf.
And I just want to say that there really is no one in the world who's doing this better than you are, right? I mean, like in a perfect scenario, right? I know some of the stuff where HiveMQ's going and some of the stuff HiveMQ's working on, and the tool that we all are waiting for is HiveMQ's building, and they have prototypes and stuff now. The execution of it is something you're already doing. Right, and if you should grab Mark and ask him to pull out his iPad and show you what he's been doing with MakeYourself.ai. So he's the only person I know who started from the human being and worked his way towards the knowledge. He made the human being an agent and then built the tools for the agent to scaffold the solution for the human being. Like, and you can watch it in real time. It's crazy how he has agents building workflows in order to be able to serve the human, right? That's incredibly powerful.
It's a lot like, so I've always just been the person who likes to go on manufacturing floors and ask people at their workstation, like, how do you know what to do? Like, what makes you so good at this? Help me understand, like, what do you use? What tools are important to you? What are important to you? How do you know what job to do next? Like, what happens when something goes wrong? And I just take that same curiosity to the agent. So I'm like, what happened in that prompt? Does this make sense to you? What do you think about this? And then it's crazy because they're all talking to each other. So I'm like, what did he say to you? What did you say to him? So it's like a lot going on there. But yeah, it's very much empathy driven.
And if you think about what Zach is doing, like all of Flow's software is Zach leads the development of Flow, and you joined Flow not that long ago, right?
Yeah, about a year ago.
Okay,
So.
and so what Zach is doing is implementing DevOps using agentic AI and agents as force multipliers for a software development team in a way that other organizations are not. Like if you look at how Microsoft laid off a bunch of people and then they have to hire back a bunch of people, is it because AI failed? No, it's because the way that they were using AI to write software was broken. Zach has figured it out at Flow, and it's why you're seeing all this crazy shit that you guys are developing. And then you take what Magnus is doing, and he's creating the N8N for us, basically, is what HiveMQ. N8N is not sufficient for industry. It is insufficient. It's really terrible at workflows. What they're doing, what HiveMQ is doing, is basically creating the harness for all of us. So then you have the three of them, the implementation, you have the strategic execution, and then you have the platform. There's a reason those are the three sitting there. And then you've got me and Sam who specialize in application of the things that these guys do. This is the reason we have the five of us on stage. This is, I believe you three, the promise of AI in industry is going to be found in the four of you, the three of you in function and Sam in execution. Really, I mean, that's why these guys are here. So Zach, I would like to ask Zach.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is what a lot of people are trying to do. What Mark is doing, a lot of people don't even know that is even remotely possible. Like most people would look at what Mark is doing and go, it never even occurred to me. You know,
the amount of context management that Zach and I do on a daily basis, Mark, just it blows my mind that
I think the audience doesn't know that these three guys are in constant communication on the Discord, nonstop, probably in other channels as well, I don't know, but these three are constantly communicating with each other and bouncing ideas off of each other and collaborating.
I like to think of it as an analogy of like if someone plays like World of Warcraft or like those sorts of games, it's like, oh, well, he's like this Claude Code genius, you know? So it's like, oh, we've got a healer. All right, great. Oh, we've got a, you know? So
Magnus is in there too now.
You know? We each have these like different like things.
Zach, how did you figure it out though? Because you're doing, what you're leading at Flow is what other organizations are trying to do and failing. Why are you succeeding? What is the reason?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in exploration and getting the reps in, right? For me, the best way to learn something is go out and build something. See where it fails. See how you can engineer a solution. See if, now you can get it to work when before it was failing 9 out of 10 times, right? There's a lot of resources too, right? This is a really exciting time to live, I think, right now. There's a lot of innovation and a lot of building going on, and there's a lot of resources out there to consume. Different YouTube videos, different communities where you can share what you're exploring and building. I think that's what we really like. And having, this chat is, I'll try something and, share with everyone. It didn't work because of this, but this was awesome, right? And then we'll kind of iterate on that, right? So you kind of have to take this exploration and, see what it can do, see where it fails, and then see for what it failed, can you engineer something around that? So I think it's a big, just getting your hands and getting the reps in.
Well, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, Magnus, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, to build on that, I mean, I think experimentation is what I would encourage all of you to do. There are foundational elements that you absolutely need to put in place to succeed at scale, but if you're not experimenting now, like you need to start immediately.
Can we just real quick hit some of those foundational elements?
Yeah,
I heard harness.
Yeah, I want to say one thing about harness too, though, because it has like, I'm not sure if that's the actual intent of the word, but harness, you can like put it on a horse or whatever, but it also means like harness the power of this thing. And I think it just it's like a humbling reminder to have humility about these, because like we don't actually, I use this thing every single day, all day. I think I'm using it right now. And like I still am amazed and in awe about what it can and can't do. And I think that every like real vendor should have adopt that perspective, because we haven't fully harnessed it, and we need a new harness to be.
One of the foundations is understanding that adaptability is probably one of the most important skills you need to have in order to harness the potential of AI. Adaptability through your learning curve, but the bigger thing is as models change, assumptions that you are operating on also change.
Yep.
That's not something we're used to. Like as models get better,
And fast.
right, right, you have to adapt so quickly. It's a foundational. Harness and adaptability are definitely the first two.
How much do folks here spend talking to AI, working with AI, developing with AI? Would you say order of magnitude 10 hours in the last year, 100 hours in the last year? Andreas, 12,000 hours in the last year. No, it's about 2,000 hours minimum, probably, where you're seeing we are. And to what Walker's point is, you can, the nuances are multi-dimensional, I say that, and there are many, and they change all the time based on quantization of the VC who needs to save power for that day, or when 4.7 Opus comes out and all your tool harness breaks.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
my personal philosophy, I have developed a process over this past couple of thousand hours where I just have a healthy distrust of those models, and I lean into the human aspect of it. So I have a 7-step process before I even begin to lay down code. And this is a research process I've learned from Zach and Mark and Magnus and others, and just thinking about it with 2,000 hours of road time. But it's that kind of touch and proximity that we need right now. And the more people participating in it, the better. If you can find a tribe like we have, it just makes everything plus plus. So.
Well, the weird thing that I think is like about the rigidity or the need for adaptability is that like I'm realizing, first of all, I'm not writing any code anyway, right? So like I'm just communicating. So what's interesting is that like the more I can remove myself as the bottleneck, because like if the thing needs to change, like it should be able to change itself. I don't know why I need to be
Which
involved.
is something you're doing so much better than other people.
I'm trying to.
You are doing it. You are definitely doing it.
Zach and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago about like if you're still designing your repositories primarily for human readability, you're creating your own bottlenecks, right? The abstraction layers that you naturally create in code. Sorry, this is getting a little deep, but the abstraction layers that you naturally create in code to make it really easy for humans to consume make it really hard for agents to consume, right? The indirection that occurs it makes it really difficult for agents to take over.
Here's the mind fuck. You're formatting the repo for the agent, and then instructing the agent to just create an ingress for you to understand what's in the repo. Instead of building the repo for humans to be able to read with ingress for agents. That when you get to that point, I guarantee Zach got there. When you get to that point, your perspective changes. Wait a minute, the repo's no longer for me.
Exactly.
The repo's for this army of agents who are doing the development, and what they're doing is building the tools for me to understand what they're doing.
If you think about the i3X effort and the graph that you just saw, right? I mean, the little bubbles on the screen are not for normal human consumption, but those little bubbles on the screen are instantly inferenced by the AI, right? So organize your stuff. We'll have an internet of MD files in the back end where humans engage one visual aspect of it and robots engage the other aspect of it.
Well, think about the power of this show when you talk about knowledge graphs. When you showed that, right? You had Thread yesterday who showed a very practical example of how an agent is using knowledge graphs to work its way through an organization and through relationships in order to get to the data it needs to solve the problem. A very practical. What you showed was a much more complex, more complex structure, but a similar example. Everyone's going to walk away from this show understanding that the power of a knowledge graph is not meant in people understanding what's on the graph. It's meant for agents to move up and down the structure so that it can solve the problem for us, so that we can do what it is we are good at, which is execution and innovation, et cetera.
So I think that brings us back to our foundations, though, which is what are the foundations? I think a really important one is a good data and context foundation, right? You need clean, normalized data that can be reasoned over, and you need a context graph, a knowledge graph, in order for agents to be able to reason over that effectively, especially in our space, right? Knowledge graphs are applicable elsewhere, but especially in our space.
Can we just take a quick pause and explain the difference quickly between just a graph and a knowledge graph, just to make sure that everybody here hears it? Somebody want to take it?
Yeah, I can take a stab. The main difference between a knowledge graph and a graph is a knowledge graph is a type of graph. So it's a specification of a graph. The knowledge graph actually contains two components. One is a ontology or a description of the domain. So you could think of this as kind of like an abstract model or a meta model that describes the factory, right? It's not your actual equipment, but it's defining the type of equipment, right?
And for those of you who don't know ontology is a representation of a relationship.
Yep, exactly. And then a knowledge graph also has instance data, right? It has an instance model. The power of knowledge graphs is it connects this ontology, which is your generic representation, to your instance data. So think of it like an agent. Let's say you had 100,000 CNCs. If you had looked at just the instance data, that data is going to overwhelm the agent, right? It's going to fill up the context window. It's not going to understand, has this CNC fit with the line or the process or even the operator operating on it, right? That's the value of the ontology. The ontology describes, hey, the CNC is on, a line, and a line is part of an area, and it describes the ontology so the agent can understand high level, but also go down into the instance data to understand, what is the actual data of the factory.
Now, thank you, and complete your thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was exactly it. I think the one foundation we need is absolutely a reliable data and context backbone. That's both data movement as well as context consumption. And then the other piece that I was going to highlight is if you're going to scale, the right architecture is important, right? So in addition to the harness, in addition to the experimentation and the ability to adapt, I think the right architecture that allows you to do this at scale and do this reliably is one of the big challenges that the point of the conversation today is to acknowledge what the gaps are in this space, not necessarily to give you all of the answers, because I think we're actively figuring out the answers, right?
I don't think that the knowledge graph is solved, by the way, just because you see nodes and so it is ultimately nodes and edges. So you have your nodes are the elements, and then they have relationships defined by the edges, and then you get those really cool, and you made a crazy one, you get these really cool looking things, and you think, oh, well, that looks really fun. I bet an agent loves that. But does it? Does that, what actually belongs in the node? Mm-hmm. How much of the, okay, so if you, because it's not known what the right node should be. It's not known what the right edge should be.
We're still learning.
Right.
Very much.
We're still learning.
I have plenty of ideas on it. I can share them with you. I guess I won't right now, but it's not. If you just give the agent a blob of the entire knowledge graph of just every machine's a node, this is a node, the machine this, every person, this favorite color there, the agent's going to be like, okay, this doesn't. I need to focus. Context. People say the context window is like a limitation of the agent. And they're like, oh, we have a million tokens.
It's a strength.
It's absolutely a strength. It means focus. Mm-hmm. And it means that you have the responsibility of being coherent in your communication. Yeah. Because if you give it every edge and node graph, it's gonna be like, okay, what do you want me to do with this? What?
I think it's a great point, right? Just because it can understand every single aspect of that node all at once and see the relationships, what question are you asking? What problem are you solving? Right? It comes down to being precise with the model too, because you only have so much. And yeah.
Should we think of agents as 6-year-olds that are savants? Might be the world's most talented
I would say
pianists.
the average agent, yes.
Yeah.
I would say the average agent, that should be the description. But the more mature we get, they're going to be Einstein times 10 on a very, very finite, specific domain.
Right. Mm-hmm. But right now, they'll wander, they'll go all over the place, they'll get distracted, but when they're in front of that piano, if you keep
I think that's a reflection of your message.
Okay.
I think if you send the right, if it does the wrong thing, it's just like in manufacturing. It's not the operator's fault. You know what I mean? It's almost never the operator's fault.
It's basically never the operator's fault.
It's okay, maybe that one person was sleeping, okay, and that, whatever. But generally speaking, they're trying to do a good job. And that's the one thing I can say about these agents is that at least I think I can, unless they're doing the whole ex machina thing on me, but is that they actually are us. They literally are built from all of our Reddit threads and our whatever, they're us. They're not, they belong to us. They are a reflection of us. And when you message into it, you have the opportunity to collapse reality. I think you were saying that the other day. You have the opportunity to collapse all of their probable outcomes into your intention. And and that's your chance,
I want to point something out. So, like, one of the big controversies in large language models is, Elon was posting about this, these models are woke, these models are not woke, whatever. No, models are neither woke nor non-woke. They are a reflection of us. And a model that is not culled, so that is, there hasn't been some type of strict restriction of certain training data, is going to be an accurate representation of the Overton window. Like, whatever is acceptable in the window is going to be the default path through which the mean of the Overton window is where the average LLM is going to give you your results from, right? If we don't do anything with the data, we don't cull it at all, right? Where it changes is when we pull data out so that we can move the mean up and down the Overton window or outside of the Overton window altogether. I want to get even nerdier. So I know for some people we're talking way over some people's heads, and some people are right with us. But I'm going to get even a little bit nerdier, and I want to go back to adaptability. One of the most important things, some of you are asking, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my plant? Practically, like, how does this change the way I start a work order? How does this change the way I change a recipe? How does this change the way I do my job on a daily basis? I know some of you have that question. We are absolutely going to get to that. But one of the things that I think we have to stress the most is that the answer we give you today is going to change. Like, we are in a period of time right now where your number one focus when it comes to AI is digital fluency. There is a maturity, there are steps of maturity you go through, and the only way to step through that maturity is through the hours. Like, everyone agrees that it was hours that got us through these levels of maturity, which landed us on this stage. And you have to go through those hours. You have to start by using a chat window as a replacement for Google, and then you got to move into prompt engineering, and then you got to move into context management, and then you got to move into distributions of agents, and then you got to move to the point where you're instructing the agent to build its own toolkit so that it can better answer your question. Like, you have to go through these maturity steps, and your primary focus has to be on digital fluency, okay? Because adaptability is a key element of success.
I like to look at them as a TI-85 calculator myself, because I had to learn a lot of math before I could begin to use the calculator correctly. A lot of hours put in.
So, bringing the conversation to the now, what should be at the forefront of all of the manufacturers right now about getting themselves ready to embrace? Let's assume that they're going to do all of this. Let's assume that they are going to experiment, they're going to bring in the expertise, they're going to build their harness, we're going to that 3 to 5 year plan. What are the foundational elements right now that they need to start looking at and evaluating and being really focused on?
Data. Use case.
Yeah.
So I'll get it started. So all of the amazing things that you saw today, or this week, the amazing, most impressive presentations we've seen this week are not possible without structure, fidelity, and context. You have to have all three of those things. You must start in your business with a semantic structure of your data. The semantic structure is important so people know, human beings know where to go to find what it is they're looking for. That's the semantic structure is for human beings, okay? The fidelity is, we have to make sure that the stuff we're putting in our structure and our data stores can be trusted, right? And last, context is the most important. The relationship between one data point to another. This is where unified namespace comes in. Everyone has always said, well, it's not sufficient. It was never meant to be sufficient. It was meant to be the starting point of the infrastructure, right? You must have structure, you must have fidelity, you must have context. So if you don't have a data infrastructure, that's where you have to start. You got to start with the data infrastructure.
I think.
Mark, yeah, every token changes the probability on the output, right? So that's where the prompt engineering comes in. That's where the data structures come in. That's where semantics come in. And treat them like buttons on a calculator. Yeah, every single word matters. Yeah.
I think if you want to figure out where to start, you could. Some people might make the argument, start with a simple use case, like, I mean, this is a manufacturing example, but like, have an agent answer phone calls, and you don't have to hire as many like people on the phone or whatever. Don't start there. I can speak on stuff to do with that, but I think where you should start is find the person in your factory who like can't take a vacation. Right? Find that person who absolutely runs that factory. You know who it is.
The planner, the maintenance engineer.
Yeah, find that person, because that person is operating within a system that doesn't honestly honor them, and they are so skilled and they have so much knowledge. Get the agent to start working to help that person, unload that person, make it so that person doesn't have to download from Excel. Make it so that person doesn't have to do that. Make it so the person doesn't have to do X, Y, or Z. And then, because it's just proof to the point earlier, like, you're not going to fire that person. No. That person is going to do so much more for your business, and they'll take vacation.
Right.
Like, find that person, and that's where you start, I think.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah, I really think it's a sort of dual path thing, right? Start building your foundations, making sure you're getting that right, and then also just start experimenting and find that person, find those use cases, as you say, Sam. Find that first sort of really valuable use case and just start experimenting. And you're going to get it wrong. Like, I want to be super clear. You're going to get it wrong probably over and over again. But as long as what you're tackling is valuable to your business, you'll figure out the paths that allow you to get it right. You'll figure out the buttons on the calculator.
Well, your goal in the beginning should be to get it wrong as much as possible. We do not learn from success. Like a truism in life, we do not learn from being successful. You can actually do something wrong, but get lucky, have all the confluence events come together to give you the outcome you were looking for, and you were actually wrong. We learn from failure. If you do it right, you will succeed. If you do it wrong, you might succeed. Okay? If you don't succeed, you definitely did it wrong. That's what we learn from. So we should be trying to make mistakes, and we should embrace mistakes. Just like when we talk about what should vendors be tracking, they should be tracking the number of problems they talked about this week, the number of solutions they propose. They shouldn't be talking about the number of people who scan their badge. We should also be asking ourselves internally in manufacturing environments, how many times did we try this week? How many times did we fail? How many times did we succeed? We need to fail a little bit more. We're not taking enough risks. We're not trying enough because we're not failing enough.
Any final thoughts before we move to a little Q&A session? We have about 5 to 10 minutes that we can do some questions.
How many times did you guys fail in designing a software system or having that conversation with the agent? I think it's a really important point. Every day, multiple times a day, and it puts a smile on my face at this point.
I actually build an agent in Cursor. I actually have an agent running in a background task that tracks every rework. So every single time my main agent does an output, how many times do we change it? You know what it is? 70% of the time. 70% of the time, the first try wasn't good enough. There's going to be some level of refactor. And there's a background test that just runs, and it's all based on diff. So it just basically takes the lines of diff and inserts them into a database. That's it. And it's 70% of the time.
Yeah, where the cost of sort of writing the actual code has gone down, a habit I've gotten into is I'll throw out a first draft. Like, I'll just completely throw out a first draft, take my learnings and give it another go. Better prompting, better inputs, more concise inputs. And so I've gotten in the habit of genuinely like knowing that my first draft is just going to get tossed, and I enjoy that fact, right? Like, yeah, it's probably
bake it into the process, right?
Yeah.
You know what? Like, as much as I've had to refactor, one thing that I have not, and this isn't just like fluffing your pillow, but one thing I have not refactored is the UNS in the center of it. Like, honestly, like the event-driven architecture is so useful for this thing. Like, it's so useful. So some choices I made, I'm happy with, but like that's one of them.
Can we put the Slido up so people can start asking, and then we can answer one more? Sam, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the litmus demo on the stage on Tuesday. That you would think that the natural language was enough to get the reliable response, but that was actually multiple hours of QA just for those 4 lines of tokens you saw. But the result is nearly deterministic every time. And it was a slog. It's hard work. 20 different, 30, 40 different times assessing every single word in that token or sequence in order to get the result that Litmus and I wanted. You know, embrace failure, expect it. QA is your friend. You know, learning from not doing it right is what we're all here for and what we're all about.
So I just want to say before we get into the questions, one of the things that I've seen on LinkedIn, I have not seen many criticisms of the show or the sponsors. I would say the sponsors who did too many PowerPoint presentations at the beginning have definitely gotten flamed pretty hard online. But one of the other comments that I've seen is why do I need another platform that I'm going to ask an agent to tell me what OEE, which line has the lowest OEE right now? Because that's kind of a use case. That's actually the vendor doing a favor for you, because that is where nearly everyone's starting, but you don't stay in that position. You're moving on from that implementation of chatbots in your plant very, very quickly. But all of our brains are being rewired to think differently, and the first step is really that implementation. Just like the first time you used ChatGPT, what did you do? You put a Google query in it. You put the same thing you would have put in a Google search bot, you put in the chat bot, and no one does that today.
Just for the record, I introduced myself to my chat bot the first time I used it. Yeah.
Of course you did.
I think, Walker, what you're really talking about is like we always talk about before agents and AI. It's really digital maturity, right? You don't know the right questions to ask until you have some maturity. As you start playing around with it, you get new ideas, right? You say, wait a second, I've never thought about it in this light. Then you try some things, and then you get some new things that you try, right? So trying to evaluate use cases is ultimately super important, right? But it's a process. It's an exploration. You have to work your way to get to that point.
Curiosity, innovation, and process were the other three foundations that I wanted. Curiosity is important.
Innovation,
and process.
Process.
Process is the last step. No process in the beginning.
Let's take the top question first. If someone is starting at 0 hours using AI, we are going to assume that they've got a ChatGPT history. But from beyond just ChatGPT is Google, where should they start today in manufacturing context?
I would think that first of all, you can use. I assume we're talking about intentional usage for the purpose of something operationally, some sort of improvement initiative, versus like you could use it, ChatGPT, for like cooking or whatever, and that's fine. I don't want to speak to that. You can just do that. People are getting value with that all over the place. But when it comes to like Kaizen in a factory where there's a lot of nuance of existing systems, like everything is brownfield. I would start with opening up one that lives in an IDE, so like Claude Code or whatever, one of those, and I would just try and talk to it. And I would try to communicate the situation and what your goals are and what your intentions are and what you're thinking about doing, and then see if it can repeat back to you what you said. And look at how coherent you were in your communication, because that alignment is that's everything. That alignment is everything, because once it understands what you want and you agree with it and you guys are aligned, that takes work. And that's going to be gone soon. That's when you would execute with it.
And from a baseline practical perspective, download Claude Desktop, get a workspace account. This workspace account is very important. Workspace account means data is not shared. So workspace account, create a project. The project should be my assistant. And then your instruction to the assistant is going to be, this is who I am. You're going to help me do my job. This is my domain. This is what I'm responsible for. And then you're going to use that agent for simple things like this Excel spreadsheet is something I have to analyze, get this data. Drop the Excel spreadsheet in and go, I have to analyze this every day. Tell me how to do this a better way. It really, really starts with like that little, what Mark is describing is using it in an IDE. What I'm describing is using it in a desktop client. Same concept.
I I found that Andrej Karpathy, anybody heard of Tesla before? He designed and led the team that built full self-driving, and he made a massive amount of neural network invention while at Tesla, and then he moved to OpenAI and helped build ChatGPT. He put out an enormous number of videos, hours and hours and hours of content, and I would highly recommend everybody go. If you're starting at zero, never touched it before, do exactly what these folks are saying. Put your hands on it, get your thousands of hours in, but also go and look at somebody who is really good at communicating why they did this, how they did it, and how they use it.
And it's important to keep the client open. I want to, just two other, what I told my employees in January of 23 was, you are an AI supervisor effective today. I have no idea how we're going to use this. I have no idea. There's no objective here other than for you to learn it. And I want you to have a chatbot open all day long. You're an AI supervisor, and you tell me how we can benefit from this, okay? But in parallel, in a manufacturing environment, go collect all your Excel spreadsheets. Your Excel spreadsheets are solutions to problems. Try to reverse engineer a spreadsheet into what problem this spreadsheet's supposed to solve, because you're going to ultimately turn that over to an agent once you're fluent enough.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to add, obviously working with, something like ChatGPT or just a chat interface, you're obviously going to learn where it works well and where it doesn't work well. There's also a lot of resources out there like GSD and some of these other frameworks. A lot of, when you're working with agents, it's really trying to define tasks, right? When I want to write code, what does it mean to write code, right? What are the substeps? What tools do I need to call? What context do I need to provide to the agent to be able to inform it, right? If you look at some of these frameworks, you can get some good ideas and examples of how they're doing that, right? So I would say use those as reference and try to look at them and see if you can pull some ideas from them.
I'll take it a slightly different direction, which is some of the tasks I like to look for are the tasks where you're a bottleneck in a process, especially when it's a bottleneck of like, I need to read a spreadsheet and then put something in Teams or Slack or whatever. Those are great ones to start with, because actually you just unlock a lot of time for yourself and time for your team if you're no longer that sort of information communication bottleneck. And I mean, this is honestly a lot of what we see today in terms of, we've actually been talking about this week, of, we send a lot of information to a central analytics system, and then, some analysis happens in the cloud, and then somebody looks at that analysis and then, Teams someone or Slack someone or calls someone. Look for those processes as easy first ones to see if you can get out of that and allow people to self-serve. Again, hey, read this spreadsheet and publish this to Teams automatically for me or whatever it might be. Those are easy first ones to have a look at.
Who here is afraid of using AI because you're afraid that at the end of the day, AI is going to replace you? And be honest, please be honest. Well, some of you are lying, for sure.
I kind of hope it does.
What's that?
I kind of hope it does.
Go to your workshop.
There's other stuff I'd like to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're way more attractive than a Tesla robot, though.
Can we scroll through and look at, can we scroll up and, AI and life sciences?
Could I answer the question about the startup, Walker?
Yeah,
Is that
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've thought a lot about this too. And I go back to some advice that a mentor of mine gave me, and he said, if you're going to start a business, pick an area of pain that nobody else wants to do, and get really, really, really good at it, and then people will give you money for it. So that's my advice for the startup. Find something, if you like AI, find something that's harder than what the VCs will be able to put out in a week.
The other thing is what HiBite and Aaron are doing is really smart too, where they're making their platform like more and more available to these MCP clients, like Claude. So like the value within, like, Claude's not going to, I mean, it could make a HiBite type thing. It would not be as good as HiBite, Like, HiBite knows that moat. They have a pain they're solving, and then, like, the actual configuration of the pieces, like, let the agent do that. The value's still in HiBite. And I think the same thing is true with with any startup. Like, ideally, you are adding some value in some area, and just consider that AI should be a user as well.
You walk into a purely Industry 3.0 factory, what are the first three things you do? Well, first off, AI is the last thing you should be thinking about if you're purely Industry 3, okay? But the answer to your question is this. I would walk the plant floor, Mark and I, we would walk the floor we would say, we would get the lay of the land, and then we would, I don't want to speak for Mark, but I know he does the same thing I do. We'd get the lay of the land. We'd go, how many widgets do you produce per year? Why is it you don't produce twice as many? And then they ultimately whittle that back to some problem, and then there's some bottleneck in the plant, and you go, okay, we know that that's the place we're going to focus when we try to demonstrate digital transformation. And then we're going to write a digital strategy statement. So that's step one. Then we're going to do a proof of value. And that proof of value is going to be connect to all the smart stuff, collect all the data. We're going to store that. We're going to analyze it in a unified namespace. And we're going to output the solution to some specific problem to demonstrate the art of the possible. And then the third step is we're going to ask, what did we learn? Those are the first 3 steps you do in an Industry 3 implementation where you haven't started at all. AI is the last thing you should be thinking about in an Industry 3 factory. Industry 3 factories aren't connected yet.
These are all really good questions.
They are.
Let's try to pick 2, and then we'll wrap after 2.
I was going to take the first part of this question here, which is more of a comment, I suppose, but for AI agent, feedback loops are extremely important. That is undeniably true. Okay. And one of the things I noticed from almost all the vendor presentations, including ours, is no ability to feedback on whether that response was useful to me, right? And this is something we need to constantly be keeping in mind is actually how does the system learn that, hey, last time you gave me an incorrect answer, and how do I improve on that? And I think as we're building, as everyone is building, we need to keep in mind that actually not only do the models need to get better, but our context needs to get better. We need to understand what went wrong in those situations and how do we replay that with different inputs to get a different result. And so anyway, just a really interesting insight.
And how UNS evolves from monitoring to execution. Well, for human beings, UNS remains the semantic hierarchy in order to navigate the business to get to the thing that we're looking for. But for agents, the relational representation of unified namespace is part of the scaffold agents will use to navigate up and down the business to answer your questions. And you've seen that over and over again this week.
Mark
Can I
mentioned
ask,
that as
what
well.
is the highest upvoted question for our last one? If we can scroll or sort by upvotes, if it's possible. I think so. I see a drop down in the upper corner that says oldest. Top questions? And now what's at the top? What does your AI toolkit include?
Good. I think we should all answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to. I mean, it changes, and it should be changing constantly. Today, if you looked at my laptop, it would be Claude Code, and I also use something called AMP, which allows me to use different agents as I work. Skills and agents are something you should be building yourself. So there are plenty of good repositories to get started with, but as you get familiar, so the question is, what does your AI toolkit include? Model, skills, agents. Model, I'm 4.7 or Opus 4.6, I guess. Give me a second here. Skills, yeah, written all of them ourselves as a team, or we have a shared artifact repository where our team can develop skills and suggest them to the rest of the org. And then agents, I've created a lot of them myself. From inspiration from other folks and from sharing with a community. But yeah, create those myself.
And mine is I am Cursor and Claude Desktop with Claude Code. My model is actually selected by OPC Router. I build agents that use the OPC Router API to make the decision on the appropriate model to use for the task at hand. I do that for cost management. And skills and agents are all built by me.
I use ChatGPT for philosophical musings and therapy. I use
Current event.
yeah, I use Cursor constantly for building Maya. It depends on whatever the latest model is. My models basically switch every 6 months, but I kind of stick with one. So right now I'm using 4.6. I'm using Opus right now. And that usually does my triage for bugs, and that's mostly what I use for building Maya. And then when it comes to actual business workflows, that's where I use Maya. And that's Gemini. Everything is Google. Everything is Google. I love Google, so it's all Google. So it's Gemini.
So like Walker, the model I use depends on the type of task I'm using. Certain models are more optimal for different types of
An
tasks.
open router. I didn't say OPC router, did I?
No, you said open router.
I said open router.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I use like Gemini 3.0. I'm using a lot of Anthropic models, so Haiku, Sonnet, Opus. But those are the typical models that I'm using. So it's not just price, but also can vary on the performance too. Yeah, exactly. Skills and agents, just like Magnus said, I think it's really important to develop the ability to define those things. Every organization is different, right? You want the tool to work for you and your process, not changing to make yourself work for our tool, right? So really big on that. One thing I would add is hooks. If you've never used hooks, that's a big one that you should be experimenting with. Hooks are allow you to interleave deterministic code with agents. So now you can have an agent produce something, and then a script to verify and validate that the agent did what it's supposed to do. So I'd create a lot of hooks as well, but a lot of it's in Claude Code.
I started talking to ChatGPT maybe 3 years ago, just esoteric conversations here.
Met at a bar.
Met at a bar one day, and then Jeff gave me the idea of pushing the little talkie talk button while I was driving, and then geez, that kind of changed my world, man.
Right?
Before that, I started to write just functional scripts with chat, and it was great. But lately, I've fallen in love with software engineering, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm with Litmus now. I love writing code, so I will write code with Claude. Claude Code is my favorite. I don't use anything at all, like no skills, no plugins, nothing, unless I have reuse. Like I made a plugin for the MQTT client. I like inventing or recreating something every time. It allows me to see the nuanced differences between the model. And because, I'd be writing the code hopefully anyway if I could figure it out, I don't mind going through a really slow slog. But what I find is that the code that I write, OPC DA algorithms in C++ or Xeno-based Rust stuff, there aren't a lot of patterns out there for that. And what the AI is particularly good at, I'm not able to take advantage of. So my process is really vanilla. I use, again, VS Code, Cloud Code for writing code. I make extremely detailed plans. Claude has an enormous set of tools, task list, background agents can run concurrently. Foreground agent can be your Claude, but they can also take on different personas. And then for business stuff, I use Claude Desktop. I've tied in some skills, but I'm not really exercising a lot of the prompt engineering on the skills yet. I think I need to go into that a little bit more. But I try to limit my repeatability, my reuse of stuff, and I try to limit the automation right now. I think in the future, I'll go much more of an automated scaffolding, maybe with Claude Code, or maybe something of our own design, or maybe something from Hive, or something from Litmus, or something from Mark. But anyway, it doesn't almost really matter how you start or what you use. You'll figure out what works for you in a sort of a symbiotic relationship with the robots. But for what it's worth, Anthropic models, Claude Code, Claude Desktop. It's my trifecta.
Hey, Jeff, how about one more?
Sure. What's your question?
No, I'm saying you
I
can.
know.
You can
I know.
go, but
I know.
One more.
I know. Walker, take your pick.
I actually do want to hear Mark's take. So what's your take on both the drama and the opportunity of OpenClaw and its severing from Claude Code and its Audi acquisition by OpenAI?
So I don't know, like, political, business machinations. I'm so blind to anything like that.
That's because he falls out of bed, he rolls over to his chair.
20
Yeah,
minutes
he
a day
codes all
coding will
day
do
and then
that.
Hug yourself.
No, it's like embarrassing. But the, but OpenClaw, CloudBot, I get excited when I see some of these things happen because it's like the her thing from earlier. Like they're so capable. When we get taken out, when you stop trying to control it and you can really harness it, and you're not the bottleneck, and you give it the ability to create its own memory, create its own tools, create its own this, and you're not the one bottlenecking it anymore, and it's trying to act on your behalf. Well, it's extremely powerful to the point of like, this could happen overnight, And that's what we saw a little bit with CloudBot. But like, that had no controls around it. I would never put that in like in a place that I was like running a business in that had any amount of like you wouldn't want to do that. It's like not. But at the same time, you can see that's what it's like. That's what Cyclops is like when the visor's off, you know? And that's what I thought was really neat about it, is because it's inspiring, because you know when you see it. And someone's like, whoa, wait, this can do what? I put this on my computer, yeah, it was difficult to install or whatever, and yeah, it has my bank account, and yeah, whatever, but like it can do what? You know, it made a social media network overnight and is like trolling me. So I think that it's amazing what can happen, and that's definitely the future. But it's lacking a proper harness, especially for industry.
Agreed. Do you think OpenAI needed OpenClaw though? I don't. I don't. I think it was a defensive play myself. But anyway.
You're probably right.
And I just want to point out, don't put your eggs in the OpenAI basket. There's no reasonable person who is believing that OpenAI is ultimately gonna win here. OpenAI will become a cautionary tale. They won't go away, but they'll become less influential.
I'm sorry. What we're going to have to do is we're going to switch the
All right, with that, I want to thank all of you. Thank you so much for the time that you put into preparing for this. Thank you so much to Litmus for making this possible. And thank you for being here, and I hope you got something from it. Can we have a round of applause? Thank you.